Many times the challenges that face Klal Yisrael in history have required an extra dimension of energy, dedication to achieve to a level of increased simcha. But the key word is increased, because a Jew is always required to be b'simcha. Yivdu Hashem b'simcha, tachas hashalo avadata Hashem Elokecha b'simcha v'tov levo. That we're taken to task in the admonition and the deprecation for not being b'simcha. Question is, then, how do we relate to Purim, where there's a moment, an urgency, this year in Yerushalayim spread over 3 days, of increased intensity of the Simcha? So I would put forth some following perhaps, hopefully, insights, impressions as to what it is that how we grapple, wrestle, do battle with the challenges, with the lo aleinu, difficulties, tragedies that befall Klal Yisrael, and yet must rise to a certain level of simcha. Firstly and foremost, we've often quoted the idea that Klal Yisrael is enjoined to be in deal with pull themselves up by their bootstraps to deal with paradoxes. That the nature of human existence means that we will simultaneously be dealing with that which is understood to be negative, problematic, down in its mood for Klal Yisrael, and to pull ourselves up. To deal with the two simultaneously. Ivdu Hashem b'simcha. Gilu beroda, that the trembling while yet rejoicing. Chazon Ish often cited, we've quoted this in the past, that a Novi has to be b'simcha to be eligible for Nevuah. That means that Yirmiyahu Novi had to be b'simcha when he authored Eicha, Lamentations. We have submitted that the source of that contradiction seems to be, we could make the case, that the Beis Yosef and the Ramah, the Machlekes, on what's the bracha mafli lasos. We talked about this, I think, very recently, that the Beis Yosef says that the complexity of this mechanism, this creation called the human body, and the Ramah says it's taking two realms of existence, an angel and an animal, putting them together, merging them, fusing them into a single entity called a man, Adam. So we're created in a state of stira, of contradiction, and all of life is to resolve that contradiction. Hence, the nature of man is such that we have to do battle. And the simcha is partially, at least, in the awareness that the residual energy, talent, instruments for the arsenal, the weapons to do battle with depression, with melancholy, the Rebbeinu Shem gave us the kelim to deal with our problems. But we have to take it a step further. We are measured by our efforts with honesty, with a man should do that which is yashrus, which is yosher, which is just. How does he know it's just? There's the halachic imperative and the norms which give us that direction. And the fact that we have that in our kit, in our ammunition kit, then we have to be b'simcha, because the Rebbe Shem gave us the ability to do so. The Vilna Gaon brings the posuk in Shir Hashirim, Harini, as Marech. Let me see to envision your appearance, that the Hashmini is koilech, they want to hear your voice. Ki koilech orev, because your voice is pleasant, sweet, and your appearance attractive. Marech Noah. Vilna Gaon correlated the part of the verse, the phrase of the verse that deals with the appearance, with Hanukkah. Hanukkah is a mitzvah vision. I have to see the candles, see the light, and that's a mitzvah that I fulfill with that ability, that sense that the Rebbe Shem blessed me with, that I can envision something. Megillah has to be heard. That's Hashmini. Question number one is that it would seem that it makes sense that we start with the appearance, because that's the way the calendar goes. We start with Hanukkah. Hanukkah comes before Purim. But the verse swings on the pivot, and then we have first a reference to Megillah, Hashmini, that ki kolech orev, your voice is sweet. Why does it switch? Why isn't it consistent with the first chronological priority that we give to Hanukkah? Perhaps we might say that historically, the truth is that Hanukkah comes after Purim. Purim is coming back to build Bayis Sheni, and that happened first. But Hanukkah time was a time, as some of us have discussed, that there was a time of a challenge, lashkicha mesterasecha, to do battle with the Torah Shebal Peh. It was Torah Shebal Peh because that was what the Greeks were after they had already forced the translation of Torah Shebiksav. Now they were after Torah Shebal Peh because they understood they were the holdouts. They were those that were still connected to an inner group that you needed to know, like the speakeasies, where you had to identify the password in order to gain entry in the time of prohibition. There was a prohibition to learn Torah, but if you had Torah Shebal Peh, then you had access to the inner sanctums of those designated areas where people were still learning Torah Sheba'al Peh. So that Targum of the Shivin, the translation, the Septuagint, did promote Hellenization, but they didn't succeed. They won the battle, but not the war, as we talked about on Hanukkah. Purim was the initial establishment of the relationship to Torah Sheba'al Peh. The Medrash Tanchuma in Parshas Noach indicates that initially they said Na'aseh v'nishma, then we're taught Kofaleim HaKagigas, they were coerced into accepting the Torah. Reconciliation, fair amount of discussion of possibilities. The Medrash Tanchuma in Parshas Noach says the difference was Torah Shebiksav, the written law, or the oral law. The written law, they accepted willingly. The oral law, Rochav Minayam, the vastness of it, the complexity of it, it was daunting. They were intimidated. Only then, by the ness of Purim, did they accept it willingly and lovingly. Question is, what does the ness of Purim have to do with accepting Torah Sheba'al Peh? And if that happened historically first, why is it that in our calendar we relate to Hanukkah first? The mitzvahs of the day of Purim, we have mitzvah of Suda, we have the Matanos Levyonim, we have Mishalach Manas. Mishalach Manas is a strange mitzvah. Matanos Levyonim, to help the poor, we understand. But, well, Bramfman doesn't need my banana and pecans. Well, what kind of mitzvah am I makayim by giving him a package of Mishalach Manas? The Suda, and we designate the time of when this works, the mitzvahs of Purim, to what city is called a Mukav Choma, surrounded by a wall, not surrounded by a wall, from the time of Yeshua ben Nun. Why the time of Yeshua ben Nun? Why not from the time of when the actual events took place in Purim? So we're told that not to embarrass Eretz Yisrael, but of course, okay, true, but there's another message there perhaps. People indulging in a Suda as those Jews who had apologetically gone to the Suda of Achashverosh, they each one is there for his interest, for his benefit, for his pleasure. And Novi says, Taiva, that when somebody is doing something for his own pleasure, Yivakesh requires, necessitates division between people. Because each one of us is enjoying that pleasure separately, individually. And it divides between people. Kabbalah Satera, Shavuos, needs Achdus, needs a complementarity of all of Klal Yisrael. Netziv teaches that there were two primary kelim, utensils, items in the Beis Mikdash, in the Mishkan, that represent Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh. The Torah Shebiksav is the Oren, the tablets that reside in the Oren. The Menorah is Torah Shebal Peh, and as we discussed on Hanukkah, that it's the light that the Rabbi Simcha correlates it. There's a Tona de Beliyahu that brings the posuk in Mishlei, all the tzaddikim yismach. The light, the very light, creates a state of simcha. What does it mean, that light? The light means knowledge, awareness. Which knowledge? Which awareness? The light of Torah. That light of Torah, that esoterically enough, we're taught that when the light heard that it was going to be hidden for tzaddikim losid lovoi, for tzaddikim for the future, then that light was b'simcha. Kabbalah Dikanyanim, we just get a glimpse, some impressions of some of these ideas. According to the Netziv, Rabbi Simcha, what we're dealing with is that the world as we know it, as we experience it, there's been a riboy, the Netziv discusses this at great length, of Torah Shebal Peh, of the oral law, the halachas, the takonas, the gzeiras, the pilpul haTorah, which was given to Moshe Rabbeinu, and Moshe Rabbeinu was neig b'tevas liboy to give it over to Klal Yisrael. Aaron HaKohen had the Havonas HaTorah, Lahiro, for psak, and for the on-the-ground interaction between people. You need a merging of the two, and you need the chavrusa of the two for Klal Yisrael to march through history. So that state of simcha is what is going to give us the capacity to be able to deal with a universe, a world where we trip, we fail, and we come up scarred, marred, limited. How do you generate a certain amount of simcha? Because you're part of Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael had to live through the threat of Haman in order to attain to a level of solidarity that would then give them the tashtit, would give them the infrastructure, the basic ability, capacity to receive Torah Shebal Peh. It needed achdus. And that achdus is generated when I send the banana and the orange to Bramfman. That's achdus. He doesn't need it, but if I do send it, then it's a fact, because we are material beings, and the reality of the psychology of interacting and experiencing empirically, he experiences and I experience that interaction between us. The transition from Moshe Rabbeinu, in the Ptira of Moshe Rabbeinu, Chazal say, hundreds of halachas were forgotten. And as Neil ben Knaz was machzir otam, returned them bipilpuloi, with limud HaTorah in what we call lamdas, the analytical part of learning Torah. that was in the time of Yeshua ben Nun. That transition. That was the greatest transition in the history of Klal Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu, Aspakaya Meira, dealing with that level of clarity of Nevuah, to that Klal Yisrael can go further without a Moshe Rabbeinu. That happens at the moment of Yeshua ben Nun. And that's the interaction between Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh. We'll talk about it, Mi'etz Hashem, soon, about the Shviras Haluchos and how the Medrash teaches that there was an appeasement, a pitzu that was given to severance, to Klal Yisrael, though they are leaving that level of clarity, of ore, of light, where the looking at the Oisius of the written law already projected the meaning, the interpretation. They didn't need the process, the analytical steps that we must go through. There was a Torah Shebal Peh, but somehow it leaped and shone with brilliance from that source. And so the Purim is the most symbolic of Esther min HaTorah min Ayin, Haster, the Rebbeinu Shem hides where we are, who we are. Potentially. His projection and showing of his presence in the world. But Mitzad Sheni, even in Golus, Yimo Anochi B'Tzorah, the Rebbeinu Shem is always with us. But the Mishkan means that there's a mobile Beis Mikdash that will house a higher level of intensity, qualitatively, of that manifestation as that Shechina comes down, that indwelling presence of the Rebbeinu Shem becomes more manifest in the Bria. That's what the Mikdash will be, and that is what the mobile Mikdash is in the desert. Klal Yisrael will go through different stages, different points in history, and everything that happens that, like it says, that Rabbi was Noteya, he planted a sapling, a Natiyah of Simcha on Purim. What's a Natiyah of Simcha? A Natiyah of Simcha means that at this moment it hasn't yet produced fruit, but it's going to produce fruit. It's going to be able to. The Simcha is already now because of anticipating where it's going. The fact that we have an oral law now in the manner in which we have it, with the Medrash teaches us, was part of the appeasement, part of Klal Yisrael's softening and appreciating of now, given this new matzav post Luchas Shniyas, post Luchas Rishonos, the Luchas Shniyas, we then come to a point of being able to grapple. There'll be a ribuy, an increase of Torah Shebal Peh, and that is Ki koilech orev. Koilech orev, your voice is sweet. The Navi emphasizes that because in fact there's a bracha v'harevno of the mesikus of Torah. I need that mesikus in order to generate the simcha. I need the simcha in order to appreciate that I have been equipped. I have been equipped and armed with what I need to deal with all of the challenges, the exigencies of being a human being, individually and collectively throughout history. Reb Shimshon Astropolia focuses on the Mishnah, Megillah Nikres, Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Daled, Tesvav, Leipochos, V'Layosef. What do I need? Not less, not more. You're telling me the dates, the 11th, the 12th, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. What do I need? What do I need? Not less and not more. If you add them up together, it says Yud Aleph, Yud Beis, Yud Gimel, Yud Daled, Tesvav, says Reb Shimshon, they come to 65, the Shem Adnos. What is the Shem Adnos? That is the enclosing of the Yud Kei Vav Kei, encapsulating it, garbing it, clothing it in a language, because we don't express the Yud Kei Vav Kei today. That the Posuk in Habakkuk is cited by a number of the Meforshim. Hashem beheichel, Kodesh Renisham is in heichel. Heichel is also 65. And the language of the Zohar is that it's like a sword, that the charba, the malbisha, the charba, malbisha, the sword is enclosed in its sheath, in its nartika. That is the Yud Kei Vav Kei. Loi pochas v'leis, not less and not more. Less is 10, less than 11. More than 15 is 16. Add them together, that's 26, that's the Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's not yet Yud Kei Vav Kei. One of the amazing items of Purim is that, to begin with, it was designed for different communities on different days, because it is about Torah Shebal Peh, the oral law, that will give us this flexibility, this energetic ingenuity, this imagination, and yet to remain connected to the Luchos. The menorah will project the light, and the Simcha will come from being able to apply the root principles grounded in the oral law, Lefi, the Masorah, according to the tradition, throughout the generations. We will always have the capacity to deal with what? Some unnerving, worse than unnerving, anxiety, frustration, disappointment. Klal Yisrael collectively, symbolized by that's what happened on Purim, the receiving of that oral law, which initially they had been intimidated. It needs all of us, Diktuk Chaverim, the Achdus of Klal Yisrael. Past years, we noted that Nichnas Yayin Yotza Soid, somebody drinks, he becomes very authentic, very genuine, and honest. Children wear masks normally when non-COVID time. They dress up and masquerade. So the difference between children and adults is probably, I think, children are authentic a whole year. They masquerade on Purim. Adults masquerade a whole year. They're authentic on Purim. And we take two cylindrical commodities, a Megillah and a bottle, in order to access the inner self. Perhaps that's part of the message that the Rebbeinu Shem said, you go with masks a whole year? Okay, so now wear masks. Rabbi Shalom, it's our collective tefillah that we, as we come closer and approximate hopefully the days of Purim, the Simcha, with a depth of Simcha that we have been equipped to deal with what we have to deal with. It should bring to a level of Achdus and Simcha, Yeshuas and Refuas for all of Klal Yisrael.